All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Team PredicitMx here. We are here to tell you the story of how we started at our original problem statement of disparate data sources, conducted 135 interviews and 4 site visits to arrive at the final problem statement, focusing on trends analysis for human capital management, as you saw in the video. My name is Andrew, and I'm here with Steph, Deba, and Chris to tell you the story of our journey. So we got out of the building in the very first week. On the very first weekend of the quarter, we visited Marine Corps Air Stations Yuma in Arizona and Miramar in Southern California so that we could experience a day in the life of a maintainer. There, we saw that an average maintainer would spend upwards of 2 hours in a 10-hour shift checking, rechecking, and rechecking their tools. We thought, aha, this is the problem. We have found the problem. We can help them improve the tool control program. So we created our very first MVP. And in the following week, we showed this MVP to stakeholders in the Naval Aviation Enterprise. We showed this MVP to an engineer in Naval Air Systems Command, and he showed us the Naval Aviation Enterprise's efforts to digitize the tool room, rolling out that exact same month. Over the course of the interviews that week, quite frankly, most of our interviewees were not very hot on our MVP. It was pretty low on their list of head herders. And in a couple weeks, our project sponsors voiced his lack of enthusiasm for our MVP. So we made our very first pivot in week 1, and we realized that tool control was not viable and that we had zoomed in too much on the problem. And so we decided to take a step back and look at some commercial corollaries. So we just hopped on Highway 101 and went to SFO to observe Pegasus Aviation Services and JetBlue. There, we realized that scheduling maintenance was challenging, and that this was consistent with the observations we had made at the Marine Corps Air Stations.
So we use this as an opportunity to look at scheduling as an opportunity to move the needle on marine readiness. This led us to our next MVP, which is a dynamic real-time scheduling tool, which forecasts based on historical variations of maintainer performance of specific maintenance action items. So our minimum viable product also included an alert component, which would notify maintenance officers when disruptions occurred and provide them with scheduling solutions to ease those disruptions. So the feedback we got from our minimum viable product is that scheduling is 60% an art and 40% a science, and that the maintenance officers relied on tribal knowledge gained through years of experience that couldn't exactly be streamlined through our scheduling tool. So while this didn't end up being our solution, we took away from this a key learning that while scheduling challenges are a symptom of the problem, they're not the root cause of the problem. Instead, the root causes are the lack of availability of parts, people, and training, which is something that we heard echoed through our entire customer discovery. So we use this to pivot and try to create future minimal viable products that address these root causes. And this led us to our next commercial visit at SFO, this time with United Maintenance Operations, where we observed how they handled maintenance complexities. And while it may be difficult to believe, the largest learning that we got is that United said that we don't have unscheduled maintenance. And they said this because they worked with Palantir to be more predictive about unscheduled maintenance to turn it into scheduled work. This contrasts greatly from the Marines, which rely on static monthly reports that don't exactly highlight information that's useful to end users. Also, on top of this, the Marines employ data analysts that differ in their roles from traditional data analysts, so the bottom line is that trend analysis with maintenance data isn't exactly being done.
So given how successful United had been in using trend analysis to improve maintenance, we wanted to think about how we could take this and these best practices back to the Marines. So our next trend analysis, our next minimum viable product was based on trend analysis. And specifically, we created dashboards to address the key things impacting readiness, which we previously mentioned are people, parts, and training. So we got some great feedback on this. This was really the first time we heard that users had really enjoyed this, and also this was something that they actually needed. So given our excitement, we decided to go back to our project sponsor and talk to him about who would actually buy this. And at the time, we thought it might be maintainers. We weren't really sure. So here's how our conversation went, and Astra was his call sign. So we said, Astra, we think we have a great idea. Which of the maintenance people should we talk to for a contract? He said, you need to go talk to the guys at SPAWAR. We had no idea who or what SPAWAR was. So we said, is that like a super special group of maintainers? And he said, not even close, you guys have a lot to learn. And we definitely had a lot to learn, but I think the biggest thing we learned from talking to him was that users are not buyers. This whole time we'd been talking to maintenance control chiefs, and we thought we'd talk to them and that they would slowly roll out our solution across the fleet. Not the case. So this week we had some significant changes to our mission model canvas. Those changes from the previous week are reflected in red. But really, the key here was our change to buy-in and support. So we found out that SPAWAR had a contract for the next generation maintenance system, which is what we would want our solution to be rolled into. So we knew we'd need buy-in from them. We'd also want support from the Marine Air Group, because the Marine Air Group encompasses several squadrons, so there'd be much more data at the group level than at the squadron level. So naturally, our next step was to head to San Diego and talk to some people at SPAWAR. So Andrew and I show up in San Diego. We kind of unexpectedly walk into a room of some very important people, but we had a great discussion there. And what we found out is that this next generation maintenance system would actually incorporate a lot of real-time trend analysis. So it really validated what we had been working on so far, which was really exciting to us. But there was a caveat. Turns out people were already working on these contracts, so we really had to be talking to the contractors.
So after this somewhat disappointing feedback, we realized we had to go talk to the contractors, who we figured would have mixed reactions to us being in the room. So what we wanted to do was make sure we picked a high priority use case for trend analysis. And one thing we'd heard over and over is utilizing manpower effectively can be really challenging. And frankly, we don't have enough metrics around how our maintainers are doing, so performance metrics and accountability around that. So for our next MVP, we built what we called a human capital management MVP. So this is what you saw in the video. It performs a number of functions, primarily tracking maintainer performance in terms of their ability to complete tasks effectively, so not just doing them in a timely fashion, but making sure that the repairs are being done such that they don't have to be done again. As a result, you can adjust purchasing privileges for parts, suggest additional trainings or remedial trainings if required for various actions, and then finally, dynamic resource allocation across squadrons based on the needs of the squadron. And we showed this to both contractors and then lots of other people across the Marine community, and broadly received very positive feedback, including from a major general who commented that he'd be happy to champion this to the Deputy Commandant for Aviation. So with all of our positive feedback, we were pretty excited. And looking back over our journey, we had huge learnings, obviously a lot of ups and downs. I think one of the biggest things we took away from this class was that it's been an absolutely tremendous experience. And I think there aren't many opportunities like this for a group of 4 students like ourselves to get exposure to such a complex and a very important organization in our society. So we had a great time during this class and really enjoyed it. As for next steps, our first next step is going to be wrapping up discussions with contractors. Palantir kind of gave us a stiff arm. Lockheed Martin is a little more interested in speaking with us. But broadly, both of them were interested in what we had to learn, and we're happy to hear what we had learned and take what we learned from our many interviews. In addition to that, we need to prep handover materials for the rest of our team. So these are the various groups that we worked with throughout the course of the project. And as I mentioned before, in spite of our great learnings, it kind of became evident towards the end of the project that we might not be the right team to build this product out and take it to market. So going into this summer, the rest of the team will be starting new ventures, all of which we're excited about. And then the final step for later tonight is we're going to be celebrating the end of the class with some margaritas. That's it. I would just quickly like to thank both our mentors, Todd and Rafi, who are in the room, and then also our project sponsors, Lieutenant Colonel Rich Lawson and Major Saul Hadagi, who were both tremendously helpful connecting us to people and putting us in touch with so many people who generously, if reluctantly, agreed to speak with us.